Eskom has welcomed National Treasury's decision to exempt the utility from reporting irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure in its annual financial statements. It's been exempted until 2025. The move has been criticized by political parties and the civic groups as a ploy to shield Eskom from being accountable. The heavily indebted SOE says it will abide by the conditions and monitoring requirements. Well, for more on this, we are joined now by Sandile Swana, a political analyst and a governance consultant. Mr. Swana, thank you very much for your time. Let's begin this conversation with what many have raised as a suspicion that they think the power utility is attempting to cover up corruption here. Is that the correct way of reading this?
Well, in the circumstances, Collie, that this arises, that concern is valid. However, we can also take them at face value, take their explanation and see if it is an acceptable explanation. The explanation that they give has got 5 points that are related to their administration. For instance, their ability to keep supporting documentation for transactions actually conducted, their ability to track audit findings, and so on and so forth. So when you look at those 5 issues, these are issues that any normal organization in the normal course of business should be competent to handle. Yeah. Eskom says they are unable to handle these issues. They are unable to detect irregular expenditures, wasteful expenditures, and criminal financial crimes that happen in the organization. Bearing in mind that the PFMA was launched in 1999, and by 2001, Eskom was a world award-winning utility, and has been successful until, very recently, when the cadre deployment introduced incompetent people into Eskom and all sorts of crime. So this failure, this administrative failure, tells us that the staff that is employed to enforce proper administration in the accounting section of Eskom and those who are related to these matters are inadequate to the task, and they are going to be inadequate for the next 3 years. Yeah. That's basically
very interesting part of the reading of the email correspondence, at least some, which has been released to the public. And that correspondence between the Eskom chairperson, Mpho Makwana, and the finance minister, it goes along the lines that suggest that the onerous requirements of the PFMA are standing in the way of Eskom basically cleaning up its reputation to funders and also trying to attract investment. So here's a question for you. Does Eskom not risk falling foul of international financial accounting standards?
Well, in a way, they are trying to avoid that. These requirements of irregular and wasteful expenditure, for instance, you wouldn't find a report like that at Pick and Pay, Sasol, and such companies, private, big listed companies. It wouldn't be there. So that, to a degree, that is not the issue. The issue here is about the taxpayers of South Africa. That is where it is. I don't think they stand a chance. But what they do stand a chance of doing, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, but if they do not do this, given their level of skill, if they do not hide this irregular expenditure and wasteful expenditure away from their creditors, and the Auditor General then qualifies their financial statements, then chances are their loans could be called up. And that is the purpose of this letter and this approval, is to reduce the chances of them failing to meet the requirements of the Auditor General, and as a result of that, their loans being called up.
What would the implication of those loans being called up be? Because that now, what you are mentioning, is absolutely critical.
Yes, it is critical. I mean, you are aware that Eskom already, I think Godongwan already put aside 250 billion of the 400 billion that they owe. obviously they still need to clarify on a billion by billion basis the monies that they are going to be owing or borrowing from anybody. But at the moment, it could be, I think, if the figures that are in the public domain are correct, it could be 200 billion or so, or some of it that would be called up and things of that kind. So it could put Treasury under enormous strain if that were to happen. And by the way, we should not be here at all. We should not be here at all. We've brought this upon ourselves.
Final question to you. Last year, a similar exemption was quietly provided to Transnet. And the question is, how has this helped that institution, that parastatal, if at all?
The comment that I've heard about that one is that there is no report, positive report. The reports that we are getting about the performance of Transnet is that it is dismal, actually. It is quite bad. So there are no lessons learned. Treasury has not come up and said, we did this last year, and this is the improvement we've seen, and these are the benefits. It actually doesn't help to hide your failures, because what this does is that it sweeps the failures under the carpet rather than fixing them. And these failures are caused by employing the wrong people in the wrong position and what is generally called cadre deployment in the state-owned companies.
Sandile Swana, let me thank you very much for your time, a political analyst that we normally talk to here, but this time around talking to us in his capacity as a governance consultant.